question. That's right on point. To add a little more data to your question, so if you have 2 minutes tonight, go home and Google, or Bing. I got in trouble in Seattle for saying Google. It's like, never come back here until you've gone to Bing. McKinsey disparity, 2009 McKinsey disparity report. And whenever I give speeches like this, somebody tweets me the link to it, and I retweet that. But it's a powerful report that actually gives statistical data to back up what you just said. That this nation, scarily, is headed off of a cliff to mediocrity to worse because of the lack of educating our larger community. And that, in fact, one of the reasons why we still have divisions in outcome based upon poverty and race is because we have not created what a true democracy is, which is robust pathways for anybody in any circumstance, no matter what zip code you're born in. We haven't done a good enough job of creating pathways for those folks to nurture the most valuable natural resource we have in America, which is its children. McKinsey quantifies our failure to heal the disparities in education in America right now, today, between $1.3 and $2.3 trillion into our GDP. And the scary thing is that something happened in 2012 that got me all excited. Wall Street Journal wrote a big story about it. What happened in 2012 is that this is the first year that babies being born in America, that there's no majority anymore. That we're fully a diverse, there's not one group, white, black, Latino, we're just a diverse hodgepodge of people. It's the first year ever this has happened in American history. And that's a wonderful thing. But then if you start slicing and dicing and projecting our failure to educate large populations, what that's going to mean for, McKinsey calls it the imposition of a permanent recession. Because you cannot be a successful country, you cannot be a leading democracy if you have a lagging education system. You can't be the #1 country in a global knowledge-based economy if you're not the #1 country in educating your population. As simple as that. And so they project really dire things unless we address, sir, what your question is. And I had a small group like this where Colin Powell, a man of greater esteem, not as politically challenged as I am, who I asked him a similar question, but I didn't even say education. I said, what's the biggest threat to our democracy? Now, his speech was about the war in Iraq. His speech was about terrorism. His speech was about nuclear proliferation. That should cause us all concern. But he knows something about history, whether you look at the fall of the Temple of Jerusalem in the year 70 by the Romans, if you look at the end of the Roman Empire in the 400s, if you look at the end of the Soviet Empire. No, great empires, great civilizations don't fall simply because of external threats. They fall because of internal corruption, because of their inability to manifest the strength that would have kept those societies going forward. And so this is our challenge. Colin Powell said the biggest threat to our democracy after a speech about foreign policy, he says our inability to educate our children. And so to me, I take that very seriously. And I faced a challenge, is that I had no direct power over my schools. But remember what we said before, what is power? Just because I'm not the superintendent of schools doesn't mean I don't have power. And so what I decided to do was to join with other people and exercise the authority that we have as a community to try to control the destiny of our schools. And jumped in big time in a very dramatic way. And so Newark is going through this very incredible period of tumultuous change. Because remember, if you want to be, I tweeted something out about this earlier this evening. If you want to be hated, try to make change. If you want to be loved, do nothing, say nothing, be about nothing. And so this is a very tumultuous period for Newark's history because we're challenging things and doing things that I feel very strongly about, but are always difficult to do. So first, just a few things, and then I'll let Sharon and the detective drag me away. But I just want to give you a few things. I want to walk out with some pragmatic things. What is Newark doing to address this problem? And we're taking on sacred cows. And I have a very simple, sort of no-nonsense view of education, which I separate schools into two types of schools. And I don't separate them into charter schools, private schools, parochial schools, all this stuff. I just have simple two categories. Schools that are educating my kids at high levels of excellence and schools that are not. Now that sounds a little irresponsible because what if you were creating 5 schools that are sucking resources and energy and making it difficult for these schools to succeed? And I actually believe that happens in some cases, especially if you have some schools that play by different rules than other schools. You see, my loyalty is to one idea, is that the public has a responsibility to educate every child, not just some children, at equal and high levels. That's my idea of public education. We have a responsibility to educate all kids. And so what we got out of was the idea of delivery mechanisms. And we said, we declared in Newark, we have to have a system of high-performing schools. If some of them are magnet, so be it. If some of them are technical schools, vocational schools, so be it. Some of them are charter schools, so be it. If some of them are all single-sexed academies, so be it. But what our dream is, and we're going to get there, and if we have our way, we're going to get there first in America. We want to create a day where a Newark parent can wake up, no matter how poor, no matter how difficult their life circumstances is, they have an array of schools to choose from to send their kid to. Do they want to send their kid to a school that during the 5 days of the school week, there are dormitory schools, that their kids living in the dorms? Hey, that's a great innovative model. It's called the Seed School in Washington, D.C. That's a model. And so we started with that thing, that premise, that is our obligation to create a system of great schools. But the first thing you got to do is start talking about everybody performing, everybody playing by the same rules. And what we found out is some charter schools weren't playing by the same rules as a lot of our district schools. Now, I'm a big advocate for charter schools. They've been incubators of innovation. A charter school, by definition, is not a good school because there's lots of bad charter schools in America, lots of very bad charter schools, and there's some great charter schools. I don't think there should be any bad charter schools because charter schools should be schools of accountability. If you can't show that you can educate kids, not at average levels, but at great levels, you should close down. So what we found, though, is even the great charter schools weren't playing by the same rules, and we had to figure out a way to level the playing field. So first of all, you can't create great charter schools and then eddies of disadvantaged kids left here, where the special needs kids are all in one school because they don't have parents that are going in. That's just not fair. And so what we said is that the populations of the schools need to reflect each other. But then we looked at these schools and realized principals over here had different powers. They could have more freedom and flexibility about choosing the teachers they wanted to choose. So we changed those rules for our district schools, something called now mutual consent. That teachers don't have to be forced into environments they don't want to be in, and a principal can choose the schools they want. We realized that charter schools were going to school longer school days. And by the way, in the United States, if you compare us to our competitors, we don't compare it too well against, if we want to be number one, we should be going to school, in my opinion, a little bit longer days, a little bit more in the school year. And so we saw the charter schools were doing that. I always think that time should be the variable, and achievement should be the constant. In our public school systems in America now, time is the constant and achievement is the variable. And so we changed that, and we said we're going to give the district schools, we just negotiated this in a contract that was announced this week, that we give our district schools far more flexibility. They can now pay teachers more for longer school days. They now can actually incentivize financially for best teachers to go into the most difficult school environments. We just revolutionized the contract. And some things people might yell at me, but I love it. I love that we have a teacher's contract that says that if you have a PhD, I know there's some PhDs here, you have a phenomenal president, but I bet you some of the people he's going to graduate this year who are first-year TFAers may actually do a better job at teaching third grade, because I talked to his wife, he's got some young kids at home, they may do a better job teaching third grade than he is, even though he's going to be one of the best college presidents in America. And so why should he, just because he has a PhD, get paid more, even though it doesn't necessarily mean he's more effective? So we've done a lot to shake things up in our system, because we're focused on fundamentally one thing. And by the way, we didn't do this battling the teachers union. We have a great teachers union leader, and this is something that all of us, and I've been there before, I was one of those people that said, oh, it's the union's fault, the union's fault. And then you suddenly look at, wait, these right-to-work states in the South have the same education problems that states like mine have strong union rules. So stop scapegoating people. We need everybody to come together and begin to focus on achievement. So the last thing I'm going to say is it can't stop with just the fixing of the school. And by the way, Newark was taking big strides. And this is the best, most honest way I have of looking at my constituents. The most honest way I have. Because I have choices. If I should ever find my wife, and she should ever consent to reproduction, which is a big if. These are two big ifs. Let's be honest for a second. The most honest thing I can say to my constituents is that would I send my child, the school I'm telling you you have to send your kid to, would I also send my kid to that school? Because I do have choices. America has choices for people that have the resources to have those choices. And by the way, there's kids in Newark and cities all over America that will use fake addresses or use an aunt's address just to get out of their system. And by the way, there's school systems in New Jersey that use taxpayer dollars to follow around these kids to see where they go home to. And if they go home someplace else, they send them the bills. And so I know in Newark years ago, there weren't that many schools that I would have sent my kids to. There may be a few, but the great thing that's happening in Newark right now is that's rapidly expanding. We have more and more high-achieving schools. And our goal in Newark is to be the first system that gets to that tipping point where all of our schools are excellent. And one of the things that's going to be necessary to do that is, first of all, willingness to break with the past a little bit. We closed some schools in Newark, and people were going crazy. We closed a school named Martin Luther King that had low attendance. It had 50% enrollment capacity. It was getting horrible, horrible scores. It was awful what we were doing to kids, not nurturing their genius. And we combined two schools together, created Renew Schools. Parents now love it. It's encouraging. It was a difficult battle, but we fought that battle. But this is the point I'm trying to make, is all of this stuff that's happening. We experimented with, as I said, all male classes. We love experimentation, but this is the point I want to make. Unless we, as the young lady who asked me the question up there, unless we start understanding that everybody is invested in the outcome of what's happening in schools here in Wilkes-Barre right now, unless we all are willing to do more for kids, then we're destined to never solve this problem. And my father, right now, there is a kid in the public school system in Wilkes-Barre, in Newark, in Oakland. My dad is there. Find him. Find him. And what stopped my father from failing, which broke cycles of poverty for my dad, wasn't just what happened in his school, it was happening in his community. And so I know one way that all of us in this room right now, if we decided, there's enough of us here, if we all said, give us the list of the highest risk fourth graders in Wilkes-Barre, and we're going to mentor one of these kids, because I'm a data person, remember, I'm not emotional. I found that the data simply says if a kid has a mentor, it dramatically drops their early unsafe sexual practices. So if you really want to care about teenage pregnancy, don't just talk about it and say things, well, women, little girls, little boys, you should. No, mentor someone. It dramatically drops their involvement in crime, too. If you say you hate juvenile crime and you want to stop that 20-year-old from shooting somebody, get them when they're in fourth grade. And it increases dramatically their achievement in school. One mentor, 4 hours a week, the amount of time we spend watching our favorite TV show. And this is what I mean, sedentary agitation. We could go home and watch our, in fact, there's ways you can mentor this organization called iMentor now. You don't even have to go and meet the kid if you don't want to. Okay? If you just don't like brushing your teeth and don't want to kill them with halitosis, do it online. And so why? This is what I'm talking about. We have the power right now to change our school system. We just brought, remember I steal, we found this great model in Brooklyn, the Bronx, South Bronx, poor school, Eagle Academy, an amazing school for all boys, and this was all poor, almost all black or Latino kids. Now 100% of the kids are going to college. We stole that model, put it into Newark, but it wasn't enough for me. I went to my church, because I always say this is a great lawyer, great judges. A lot of debate's been in the Constitution about religion. Two parts of the clause. One is the Establishment Clause. I don't believe government should ever establish a religion. The second clause is it shouldn't inhibit the free exercise of faith. For me, I'm really radical. That's why I get in trouble, even within the Christian church. I don't care how you pray. I care how you serve. I don't care how much you profess your love of your God. I want to see how much you love all God's children. And I want people to profess their faith through the work that they do. If your faith is all that great, don't put it up in my face and tell me that it's words of your scripture. Because I was taught in my church, faith without works is dead. And so what we did with my church is we said every single one of those kids in this new school should have a mentor. So we not only brought a new model, but we matched all of the kids, many of them just like my dad, coming from single-parent families with kids. So now we created a mentor movement in Newark that's trying to grow and get stronger. And so anybody here who cares about education, get involved in a child's life. Because at the end of the day, and this is what Max Rosenn to me is about. I never met the man. But at the end of the day, your legacy that you leave will have nothing to do about how much you talked about your problems, how much you talked about your God, how much you talked about whatever it is. It's going to be, your legacy is always going to be what you did for other people. And if you do the things that everybody else is doing, you're going to get the same results everybody else is getting. But if your church, if your community, if your city, so what we're trying to be a testimony to in Newark, if you are willing to do the things that other people don't do, you will always get the results that other people don't get. Thank you, everybody.